February 2019. Caracas, Venezuela. Inside the presidential palace, Nicolás Maduro was relaxed, confident, surrounded by his inner circle, claiming he had total control of Venezuela. Then his intelligence chief walked in with one report that changed everything. U.S. Special Operations Forces were not planning to infiltrate Venezuela. They were already inside. Delta Force operators, CIA paramilitary teams, Special Activities Center units, embedded with the opposition, mapping targets, tracking his movements, preparing options for Washington. In a single briefing, Maduro realized a horrifying truth. The Americans didn't need to invade. They could end his regime with a precision strike from forces already in position. This is the moment Maduro understood his power was an illusion, and why he's still terrified today. By early 2019, Venezuela wasn't just in crisis, it was collapsing. Hyperinflation hit over 10 million%. Supermarket shelves were empty. Hospitals ran out of basic medicine. Entire cities went dark for days at a time. Oil, the only serious source of money for the regime, fell to its lowest production levels in decades. Maduro stayed in power the only way he could, through the military and through Cuban intelligence. Generals weren't loyal out of ideology. They were loyal because they were rich. Drug trafficking, gold smuggling, oil theft. If Maduro fell, they lost everything. Then Juan Guaidó stepped forward. On January 23, 2019, the head of Venezuela's National Assembly declared himself interim president, arguing Maduro's re-election was illegitimate under Venezuela's own constitution. Over 50 countries backed him. The United States, most of Latin America, much of Europe. Diplomatically, Maduro was suddenly isolated. But recognition alone doesn't topple a regime. Guaidó needed the one thing he didn't have: the Venezuelan armed forces. So he reached out to Washington, quietly, through back channels. He didn't ask for a full invasion. He asked for intelligence, training, equipment, maybe more. In Washington, the Trump administration chose a middle path. No open invasion, but no hands-off either. They chose covert support. Special Operations Forces, already moving into position. By February 2019, those teams were not on the way to Venezuela. They were operating inside it. U.S. Special Operations Forces don't announce their presence. They infiltrate quietly, establish networks, blend in. Delta Force operators likely entered Venezuela through Colombia. Land border. Porous. Easy to cross with proper documentation and cover identities. Some probably flew commercial flights to Caracas weeks earlier. Tourist visas. Business covers. Posing as journalists. Aid workers. Energy sector consultants. Venezuela's economy was collapsing, but foreigners still operated there. A Delta operator steps off a bus in Caracas, just another tired traveler. A CIA officer, posing as an energy consultant, checks into a hotel overlooking a military base. CIA Special Activities Center personnel coordinated with Colombian intelligence, set up safe houses in Caracas, established communications networks, recruited local assets. These weren't large teams, maybe 20 to 30 personnel total. Small groups, 2 or 3 operators per team, operating independently. No central command post inside Venezuela. Distributed operations reduced detection risk. Their mission was reconnaissance and preparation, not direct action, not yet. Map regime targets, presidential palace, military headquarters, intelligence facilities, ammunition depots, communications centers. Everything the Pentagon would need to strike if intervention was authorized. Identify Venezuelan military units willing to defect, make contact through intermediaries, assess their capabilities, determine which generals could be turned, which units would fight for Maduro, which would stand aside. Conduct surveillance on Maduro's inner circle, track movements, identify patterns, determine security vulnerabilities, Where does Maduro sleep? What routes does he travel? How many bodyguards? What weapons do they carry? This is classic special operations preparation. The same tactics were used before Panama in 1989, before Afghanistan in 2001, before Iraq in 2003. Delta Force and CIA operators infiltrate the target country, establish networks, gather intelligence, position assets. By the time a political decision is made to intervene, special operations forces are ready. They don't need weeks to deploy. They're already in position, ready to execute within hours. Maduro's intelligence service, SEBIN, isn't incompetent, Cuban-trained, Russian-advised. They conduct surveillance, monitor threats, track foreign agents. But special operations forces are trained to evade exactly this kind of security state. They operate in civilian clothes, use encrypted communications, change locations frequently, maintain strict operational security. SEBIN likely suspected American presence for weeks before confirming it. Reports of foreigners asking questions about military facilities. Americans meeting with opposition figures. Unusual communications traffic in key neighborhoods. But suspicion isn't confirmation, and every time SEBIN followed a lead, the Americans were gone. Safe houses abandoned. Cover identities discarded. Operators relocated. Then SEBIN got a break. Or the Americans got careless. One version says Venezuelan counterintelligence intercepted an encrypted satellite transmission. They couldn't read the content, but signal analysis showed American military encryption protocols, proof that US military-linked units were operating inside Venezuela. Another version says a Venezuelan officer working with the Americans was identified through surveillance, followed to a meeting with a suspected CIA operative. Photographs taken, evidence gathered. Whichever version is true, the conclusion was the same. SEBIN confirmed what they feared. American Special Operations Forces were operating inside Venezuela. Multiple teams. Weeks of activity. Extensive intelligence collection. The intelligence chief briefed Maduro personally, showed him the evidence, explained the implications. Maduro's reaction was immediate: fear. Maduro understood exactly what American Special Operations presence meant. This wasn't about some distant, hypothetical invasion. This was preparation for imminent action. Delta Force doesn't infiltrate a country just to take pictures. The CIA already has assets for that. When Special Operations Forces deploy, it's because kinetic action is planned or at least seriously on the table. Their presence meant the Pentagon had contingency plans for Venezuela, not theoretical war games, operational plans, with people already in place to execute them. If the Trump administration decided regime change was necessary, the timeline would be brutally short. Delta Force operators already inside Venezuela would move first. Secure key objectives. Capture or eliminate Maduro. Seize government facilities. Disable command and control. At the same time, Marines could land from amphibious ships in the Caribbean. Secure Caracas Airport. Open an air bridge for follow-on forces. By the time most Venezuelan generals understood what was happening, it would be over. Maduro in American custody or dead. New government installed. Regime change complete. This is how modern regime change works, when special operations forces are involved. Not World War II-style invasions. Precision operations by small teams creating conditions for political transition. Maduro faced a terrifying reality. His survival depended on Americans choosing not to act, not on his ability to stop them. He couldn't expel operators he couldn't find, couldn't defend against plans he couldn't see. His life now rested on a political decision in Washington, not on any decision he could make in Caracas. That's not sovereignty. That's vulnerability. And Maduro knew it. Maduro's immediate response was a security crackdown. Presidential security exploded in size. New bodyguards, up-armored vehicles, constant movement between locations, never sleeping in the same place twice. He purged officers suspected of disloyalty. Dozens of generals arrested. Hundreds of lower-ranking officers detained or sidelined. Anyone with American contacts became suspect. Cuban intelligence advisors flooded into Venezuela, helping Seban identify American operatives, teaching advanced counterintelligence techniques, setting up new monitoring systems. But Maduro knew these measures weren't a real deterrent, just delaying tactics. If the Americans chose to act, Cuban advisors couldn't stop Delta Force. So he reached out to Russia, requested military support. Russian military advisors and Wagner Group contractors deployed to Venezuela, officially to protect key facilities. In reality, to provide additional security for Maduro personally. For American planners, this created a new complication. Any operation against Maduro risked killing Russians. Any intervention risked direct US-Russia confrontation. Potential casualties on both sides. Diplomatic crisis. That was intentional. Maduro was using Russian presence as a shield, raising the political cost of any US intervention. But even Russian boots on the ground weren't a guarantee of safety. American Special Operations Forces could still execute a decapitation strike against Maduro. Russians would be secondary considerations avoided or neutralized if necessary. The mission would focus on regime targets, not Russian personnel. Maduro's final defensive measure was propaganda. Public speeches about American aggression, imperialist plots, rallying nationalist sentiment, portraying himself as the defender of Venezuelan sovereignty against foreign invasion. The propaganda was for a domestic audience, but behind the scenes, Maduro knew the truth. The Americans were already inside. His regime had survived their presence barely. American Special Operations Forces were positioned. Intelligence gathered. Plans ready. So why didn't the operation execute? Politics. Even a limited special operations strike in Venezuela would have triggered massive controversy. In Washington, congressional Democrats would have opposed it. Unauthorized use of force. Another endless war. Regime change for oil. At home, the domestic backlash could be severe. Internationally, the reaction would also be negative. Even nations that recognized Guaidó opposed military intervention. They preferred diplomatic and economic pressure. Military action would fracture that international consensus. Latin American allies were particularly against it. Memories of past US interventions in the region. Accusations of Yankee imperialism. Historical trauma still alive in the political culture. Regional opposition would undermine the legitimacy of any post-Maduro government. Then came the most important break, Guaidó himself. He privately asked the Americans not to intervene militarily. He wanted Venezuelan officers to defect, Venezuelan people to force change. A foreign intervention would delegitimize any transition and brand him as an American puppet. So the Trump administration held back. They maintained special operations presence, kept options open, but never authorized the strike. The forces withdrew gradually in the following months. Not all at once, quietly, slowly, maintaining capability as long as possible. But eventually, the political decision was clear. No military intervention. American operators exfiltrated. Back to Colombia. Back to the United States. Mission incomplete, but not failed. Intelligence gathered. Networks established. Capability demonstrated. And Maduro learned the key lesson. American Special Operations Forces can infiltrate Venezuela, position for regime change, and execute if ordered. His survival depends on political restraint in Washington, not on his own security measures. Even today, Maduro lives with the fear that American Special Operations Forces could return, or maybe never left. Every foreign visitor is suspect. Every opposition meeting monitored. Every military officer watched for signs of American contact. Maduro's security measures remain extreme. Constant movement. Multiple residences. Body doubles. trusted Cuban security personnel, Russian military contractors. He avoids predictable patterns, doesn't announce travel in advance, changes plans at the last minute. He lives a paranoid existence because he knows what American operators can do. The 2019 infiltration demonstrated American capability. Delta Force and the CIA can penetrate Venezuela, operate undetected for weeks, position for a strike, and Venezuelan intelligence can't reliably stop them. This knowledge constrains Maduro's behavior. He can't cross certain lines, can't attack American interests too directly, can't seize American citizens, can't dramatically escalate confrontation, because crossing those lines might trigger the operation that was planned in 2019, the strike that was prepared but never executed, the regime change that remains possible if Washington ever decides it's necessary. Maduro survived 2019, not through strength, but through American restraint. And that restraint could end at any time. If it does, Special Operations Forces won't need to infiltrate Venezuela. They might already be there, watching, waiting, ready to execute on order. That's the nightmare Maduro lives with. The certainty that American operators could be inside Venezuela right now, and he wouldn't know until it was too late. Maduro's last stand came in February 2019, when he realized U.S. Special Forces were already inside Venezuela, not planning future operations, operating in the present. Delta Force operators, CIA personnel, embedded with the opposition, mapping targets, recruiting defectors, creating conditions for transition. The operation never executed. Political decisions held it back. But the capability was demonstrated. Maduro learned that his regime could end whenever Washington decided. That lesson shapes Venezuelan behavior today. Maduro is careful about confronting American interests. He knows that crossing certain lines could trigger a response he can't stop. His survival depends on American restraint, not his own strength, not his security measures, not Cuban or Russian support. Just political calculation in Washington. And that calculation could change at any time. Maduro knows it, lives with it, and fears it. That's not strength. That's survival on borrowed time. If you want more stories about special operations, covert missions, and how elite forces prepare for regime change, hit that subscribe button for Battlescope. Smash that like button and share this video with anyone interested in special operations and geopolitical strategy. Drop a comment below. Should the US have executed the operation? Or was restraint the right decision? Thanks for watching. Stay sharp, stay informed. And remember, the most dangerous operations are the ones you never see coming.